This week we're doing a bokeh or bokeh, or there's 50 other ways of saying it. Avoid using the word bokeh, because whatever I say is going to be wrong. Somebody else wants to pronounce it slightly different, so I'll avoid it. I've set the laptop and the camera up so you can actually see what I'm doing. It actually is quite simple, as long as you go through some basic rules on what you need to do for it. I have a lens here. It's a manual old lens, and it's just an example to show you the F number, which is the field of depth. With doing this type of photography, you want a really short field of depth, which is like the lower end of the number, which is like F2, F3, F4, whatever your lens will go down to, which is when it's fully open. And then when you shut it completely, see the hole disappearing? That's the opposite end of the scale, which will be F22 or higher, depending on the lens. They all vary a little bit. Just put that lens down, somewhere so I don't break it. Right, this time of year is great for doing it because we have fairy lights out all the time. And it's one of those things it's actually worth getting. I mean, I've got some here, and I actually use them quite a lot. This time of year, I mean, like £2 for some of these. Battery ones are the best, I find, because then you don't have to plug them in, you can move them where you like. But I've got a little Tupperware box upstairs, and I put lots of little different bits and pieces, and these will be in there, which I can cover another day if anyone's interested to see what's in my little Tupperware box of odds and sods for photography. Crack on. I'll run through some of the settings. They're actually really quite easy. I've put the camera on the tripod today because it makes life a little bit easier, keep my hands free. Also keeps it steady, but you can get away without using it. So put the camera on aperture priority, AV or A, whichever is marked up on your camera. I'm using auto ISO today, so it's another thing out of the way you don't need to worry about. And put the F number, which I've just showed you on that old lens, put it on the lowest number which your camera will do. So if it's F3, F4, F2, whatever the lowest number it will go down to. So the field of depth is as shallow as possible. Obviously, if you've got a macro lens, it'll do it even shorter. So if you've got a lens which says macro setting on it, it'll actually compress it a little bit more. It does actually help, but it's fine as it is. Obviously, the tree is probably about 4 foot away from me, so the idea is to get the object in focus and the background out of focus. Be like Christmas, you could go out and it could be walking through a wood and you see that's an acorn on a tree and there's leaves behind it, a reasonable distance behind, and the sun. Keep the sun out of the way so it's in the picture but hidden behind a tree itself or some leaves further back, and it have the same effect, so you get that dapple effect round the back, and then the actual object will be quite sharp, and that's the object to focus on. So you need still a good distance between you and the tree. Quite helpful to do is find the minimal distance of the lens. So if your object is here, this is about the minimum because there's a 70mm lens on here. If I get any closer, I won't be able to focus on that. But that's about 70mm from the front of the lens, which is about as small as it will go. So it's optimising it as much as possible. Obviously this time of year we've got a lot more decorations around with nice shiny things, but they work really well, as you can see in the image. And what you can do is actually play around with it a little bit and actually get the size of the circles, which all depends on how far away you are from the light source, to what you want it. There you go. The only thing is, if it's too shiny, remember you get the reflection back off of whatever you're looking at you. So if you've got something shiny in the picture, if it's like this, you can probably see the reflection of everything else in the room. But you can, yeah, there's some other things as well. If you've mastered the idea and you've got that, the next thing is really fun to do. So the next thing, what I'll do is I'll quickly run back through those settings, just so it's at the forefront of your mind rather than rewinding the video and looking back through it all. So I'm going to put the camera on AV, aperture priority, or A, whichever the camera, ISO auto, so it's doing it all itself. Put the F number to the lowest F number, which is like F3, F4, whatever it will go down to. And then obviously focusing on your object, either hold the focus button down when you got it into focus, because you might not need, or knock the focus off altogether, and then you don't need to do anything. It's not going to move on its own. That's what I've done in this one. I just focused in, just turn the autofocus off. So if anything, it's not going to make a difference now. It's still focused in on there. The next little bit is actually quite fun and it's actually quite easy. Whether or not you're using, oh, there you go, just a scrap of paper. It's an envelope I've just found, and I've cut some shapes in it. There's a Christmas tree, and there's a diamond, and there's a star, sort of. It works better with darker stuff, and all you need to do is actually put this right against the front of the lens. So I don't know if you can see, I'll try not to get in the way of the camera. And you've got a filter holder, you know, the ones you just screw into the front of the camera, and then you can slide filters into it. What works really well, so I've got some of this shiny paper here, which can add effect to it, and use the filter, draw a template out on the back of it so you know it's the right size to put in the filter, cut your shape out, and then that just goes straight on the front of the camera. But you have to play around. It's actually quite good to play around and work out what size works the best on it. And also, if you're using different coloured stuff like this, give it quite an interesting shiny effect as well. It's worth playing around with. Obviously, you haven't got a filter holder and you've got a hood to go on it. You can use the same sort of thing by simply, where's my, oh, there it is. Getting your bit of paper, and then put it on, a couple of bits of masking tape or something. Don't use sellotape in the camera, but if you've got a hood, and then you can just cut around the outside roughly, pin it on, and then just screw it on backwards, because they go on backwards as well, out of the way, rather than forwards, because the forwards, unless you've got the other one, tape it on, screw it on the front, job's done. And if you haven't got a hood, because you've got a bridge camera or something else which hasn't got a hood with it, you can just roll a piece of cardboard up around the edge of the lens. I often use masking tape and stuff anyway for these sort of things, and just pin a little bit of masking tape around it, perhaps not quite this long, and then just stick it on the front, and you can slide it on like a tube. Costs nothing. But it's quite fun to do. It's actually quite interesting what effects you come up with. Doesn't have to be just these things. So think about if you go out and there's a street light, it will work the same way as a street light. If we were talking the other week, we had a puddle. You could have the puddle in focus and the street light out focus. So for trees with leaves, and there's an object, say an acorn near, and the rest is a dappled effect in the background. And there's loads of ways, but this time of year, since it is Christmas and you've got the fairy lights out, have a go, see what you come up with. Even if you went into town and they've got the Christmas lights up, you can do the same thing. That works really well as well. So yeah, I'd love to see what you come up with. Hope you enjoyed the video. I'll leave you a few more pictures.